a knight can't reach c6 and play d4, and this is just, this is a common line. This queen is quite safe on d4 because there's no knight c6. But yeah, white has to kind of strike in the center immediately. And then the other line is like bishop is like knight here, e4, and like knight d4 or something. And at least, you forced the pawns on light squares, and you can kind of chip away at them eventually with d3 and bishop g2. But he played bishop g2 instead, and now after d5, now take, and black just owns the center. So the only thing white can really do here to kind of even equalize is to play queen to b3, hit this pawn. So now we're attacking this pawn 3 times, it's only defended twice, and this bishop can't really defend it a 3rd time because of queen takes b7. So the best move is knight c6, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, queen b6, knight f3, bishop e6, queen e4, and f5. Okay, so black's down a pawn, but he has great compensation because his queen's getting harassed, he has lead in development, and he can use his open d-file to his advantage. But, it's probably about equal. The other way black can play actually is to play after knight takes d5, play knight d4. Then knight takes f6,
check.
Queen takes f6, queen d3, bishop f5, threatening knight c2. Bishop e4, queen e4, rook c8, again threatening knight c2, and king f1. And again, white's up a pawn, but it's going to take white a few moves to complete his development. He's going to have to play like king g2 and knight f3 and stuff. This bishop is kind of stuck. So again, it's kind of another pawn sacrifice that's roughly equal. So those are the only really ways that white can kind of hope for equality. But e3 is just very bad. If you're going to play a move, you at least play a move like d3. Because now after e3, black actually can just play d4. If pawn takes, knight e4, knight takes, bishop takes, d3 is very strong. It's actually a temporary pawn sacrifice. Queen f3, bishop c5, bishop d3, and just castle. And the problem is that, okay, black's up, down a pawn, but rook e8's coming, this bishop is really dead, and there's all sorts of holes on d4, b4, d3 even. So this is actually really strong for black. So that sacrifice to kind of just shut in white's pieces is good. And if he doesn't take on d4 and just moves his knight, say knight e4, well then take, f5, bishop g2, and knight c6. And again, black wants to maybe play d3 and e4 and just establish this massive bind. So again, white's not looking good here. He can't really play knight e2 even because of d3. So he probably has to play d3 himself, but then black's ahead in development and has a better position. So white has to be careful about avoiding these types of lines. So e3 was a big mistake. But black did not play d4. Black played bishop e6. So now white has a chance to kind of strike back in the center. Knight g2 is good. Knight c6. d4 was good. Bishop e4. And now white can actually isolate black's pawn with de5, knight e5, and castle. White's a little cramped, but he has access to this d4 square now with his knight. So by taking on e5, he opens up the d4 square. So now he can try to get his pieces out. Knight d4, queen e2, bishop d2, rook d1, rook c1. Makes sense. But with his pawn on d4, his position's rather cramped. And always black has the opportunity to play e4 potentially. So after bishop to b4, he played queen to b3, castle, castle. Now, after here, okay. So here, in this position, black should probably just take this knight with the idea that after bc3, you're just going to play queen d7, defend this pawn, and get on this diagonal. And even if knight c3, or sorry, if queen c3, also just queen d7. The rooks are coming to c8 potentially. Maybe you want to trade off this bishop. Maybe you want to play e4 at some point. Yeah, it's just a comfortable position for black. But by playing bishop d6, he allowed this queen takes b7 to occur. And this queen is actually It looks dangerous. This queen might get trapped, but it actually has good resources to get out. So knight e7. And now again, white should probably do this exchange first. Because if black ever attacks the queen somehow, like rook b8, the queen can always get out this way. And for how precarious the queen looks on b7, it's actually really hard to attack. So it's fine. It's fine. But he played queen b3 because I guess he was worried about the queen getting entombed. Okay, rook b8 gained tempo. Queen d1. Probably better than queen c2 because bishop f5 would come with tempo. So d1 is actually a better square. It also hits d5. When you exchange. Queen d7. So again here, taking on e5 is good. And knight d4. Knights make excellent blockaders of isolated pawns. So it just helps you untangle your pieces as white, because your pieces are very passive in this position. But instead you play rook e1. Which doesn't look like it makes much sense. Kind of like a waste of a move. Okay, c8. Okay, so finally he took on e5, which is correct. Took long enough. But again, knight d4 makes a lot of sense. It just helps get your pieces out. Now your queen can go someplace, maybe to e2 or something. But he didn't do that. He played f4, which is a bit weakening now. The problem is this pawn is now weaker. So it looks aggressive, but your pawn structure is compromised for it. So bishop takes c3 was good, knight takes c3, bishop h3, makes sense. Bishop h1 was good. Keeping this bishop is important, because all of a sudden these squares become a lot weaker if this bishop is gone. So bishop g4, but now he kind of forgot what he did, and he plays bishop f3. So he should have obviously not moved his bishop to f3, he should have just played queen d3, and kept this bishop, and kept an eye on his light squares, his weak light squares, because this pawn structure means your light squares are all weak. But he just offers a trade now. So after playing bishop h1, a good move to avoid the trade, now he just offers a trade. So he kind of forgot what he was doing. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now rook c4 is strong. The idea is actually you simply want to play knight f6, or sorry, knight f5, knight d6, and knight to e4. And that knight is unassailable thanks to the bishop trade. Okay, he played knight e4 right away, which unfortunately hangs a pawn to knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes, queen takes. Okay, so rook c7. Probably a4 is better here. So a4 is actually a really important positional idea. The point is white wants to play b4 and get his bishop out, because he can't move his bishop to d2 because number one, it's attacked, and number two, the pawn is hanging. So by playing a4, you fix this pawn structure, which makes this bishop weaker. You also have an opportunity to play rook b3, double on the file. Your queen defends a4. And it just makes it that much harder for white to complete his development. So black, even though he's down a pawn, has great compensation because his rooks are great. White's rooks kind of suck, and his knight has good hopping outposts. So a4 is an important positional idea. And rook c7, guess what white played? White played b4. Excellent move. So now the bishop does get out because the queen defends b4. So b4 was very good. Rook b c8, bishop b2, rook c2. Okay. Now white has to find the best move here. White has to find the best move here. Do you guys know what the best move for white is here? Surprisingly enough, it's actually rook to d1, rook e d1. So not even defending this bishop. The point is, though, that we're threatening queen takes knight, and we're also threatening queen takes rook if the queen moves too far away. So, for example, if queen g4 or something, queen takes c2. And if rook takes c2, this is mate.
Checkmate.
So after rook e d1, queen c7. But now just rook c1. And this is fine. Similarly, if queen to e8, rook c1 again is fine, because black's pieces are kind of all pinned down. Another idea that white could have tried is queen to d4 with the idea of fork of a queen and mate. Because don't forget, white's up 2 pawns now. So a queen trade is not good. So queen g4 would be forced. Rook a c1, f6, rook takes, and the good move queen to d3, trying to evict this rook from the 7th rank. Point being that if rook takes b2, queen c3 actually traps the rook. If the rook goes to a2 or to e2, queen c4 wins the rook with check. So this rook's actually trapped. So instead of taking on b2, he probably would have to go rook to or queen to c8, and then queen b3 check, king f8, and bishop d4. And white's doing fine. Just wants to try to promote this pawn. Okay, but unfortunately he blunders here with the logical looking bishop d4. But now actually black has a forced win here. Black has a forced win here. And the way to do it is queen to h3, threatening mate. So only one way to defend that. Queen to h1 is forced. And now black to move and win. Black to move and win. Simply knight to f5. And there's no defense against knight takes g3. Say you play, I don't know, b5. Knight takes g3. So if your queen moves, I play mate. Say queen f3, this is mate.
Checkmate.
If you take, I go mate.
Check.
Here.
Checkmate.
And there's nothing else you can do. I mean, you're dead. So knight f5 was the winning move. Knight f5 was the winning move. Black missed this, though, and played rook to d2, which now lets white escape. But white has to find accurate moves. Rook a c1. So now knight f5 is impossible because rook takes rook is mate. h5 to give yourself luft. Rook takes.
Check.
Knight takes. Rook c1. a4, queen g4, queen c6. Rook d1,
check.
rook d1, queen d1, and this
check.
is slightly better. Or sorry, this is just a draw. Sorry, not slightly better. It's just a draw because there's a perpetual check. You're just gonna go check,
check,
check, and check, and this is just
check.
A draw. Yeah. So actually, white could add a draw here. Sorry. But instead, after rook to d2, he played rook e d1. Okay, which is also okay, because rook dc2, e4 forced to stop knight f5, knight g6, with the idea to take on f4. So if you play like rook b1 or something, knight takes f4, take, queen g4 check, is winning. So after knight g6, bishop e3 to stop that. Oops. Now queen g4, rook f1 forced, because black's idea is to play knight h4 and knight f3 check. So queen g4, rook f1, knight h4 anyway, rook f2, rook takes, bishop takes, rook c2, e5 threatening queen a8, knight
check.
f3, king f1, knight d2,
check.
king g1, knight f3,
check.
Draw. Because white's still up 2 pawns, so black really has nothing better, because white's actually somehow surviving. Okay, but instead, after all this, he played rook e2, rook c1, rook c1, oops, rook c1, h6. Okay, so here again, it was necessary to stop knight f5. Don't forget, he couldn't play knight f5 now because of mate. But after h6, he is threatening knight f5, so you gotta play e4. Only move. Only move. But instead he played b takes a5. And now black wins, knight f5. Nothing to stop knight takes g3 again. So a6. And now knight takes g3 wins. a7, knight takes h1. a8 equals
Check.
queen. King h7, queen takes h1. Only move. Queen g4 check.
Check.
King f1 and rook to d2. Threatening queen e2 check, which is unstoppable. Rook e1, queen h3 check. And queen h4. And now queen f2 and queen g4, you can't stop both. So you can go rook f1, but now I go queen g4
Check.
in 1. And you can go rook. Oh, I'm threatening queen takes rook as well, by the way. So yeah, this is just dead. So even though you get a new queen, it doesn't help you. So knight takes g3 wins. Rook a2, not good. a7, rook a3, queen.
Check.
Take.
Check.
King h7. Okay, so white's up a full rook here. Okay, but this game's not over yet. This game is not over yet. So g6 was played. Oh, sorry, queen e4 was played. And then g6. Okay, so now queen e8 just wins instantly because you're threatening mate on h8. So knight takes d4 is forced. But now queen takes f7 check. King h8. Okay, you can't go rook c8 mate yet because of the queen on h3. But you actually have a mate anyway. Queen f6 check. King King g8. And at the very least, just queen takes d4 is going to mate. No, sorry. Sorry, queen f8 check is actually better.
Check.
And then rook c7 is mate.
Check.
Okay, so anyway. That could have been an easy win. So after queen e4 g6, he played rook c8 instead. Okay, but this is not nearly as good though, because after knight takes d4, I'm hitting your rook. So you can't take my knight. So you have to go queen e8, but now I start getting a lot of checks. So knight f3, or sorry, knight e2 check is good. So if here it's mate.
Checkmate.
So king f2 forced. Queen h2 check. And now the question is, where should the king go? If king f1 is just mate in 2, knight takes g3. So the question is, should you go to f3 or should you go to e1? And the answer is e1. So the reason is after king e1, the checks kind of run out. And it's actually similar to what happened in the game, but with an extra piece. So the point is, okay, you basically have to give up this knight to keep checking. So queen h1 check, queen g2 check, and now we just run for this square. So queen f1 check, queen e2 check, queen e1 check, queen c1 check, queen d2 check, check, queen c3, or sorry, not queen c3. If queen b3 check, just queen e6, queen b7, and queen e7. And now you can't play this because of mate. Check and mate.
Checkmate.
So you basically just run your king until you avoid the checks on f7. So that's a long sequence, but you know, just keep running your king towards your pieces. Because if you keep your king on the bottom back ranks, you don't have any pieces to interpose. But if you run your king towards your pieces, eventually you can use your pieces to help you. But instead he played king f3. But the problem is with king f3 is that now he has to keep the knight in this variation. So knight g1 check. King e4. So you probably should have played f5 check here. King e5, knight f3 check. King f6, queen b2 check. King e6. Or I guess king f7 even. Queen b7 check. Queen e7. And then the same thing with king f6 check and mate. But instead, you play queen g2 check,
check,
king d4, queen d2
check,
check, king c4, queen
check,
c2 check, king d5, queen f5
check,
check, king c6, queen c2 check,
check,
king d6. There's always this mate, and there's always this mate, so you gotta keep checking. Queen d3
check,
check, king c7, queen c4,
check,
king d8, and finally black resigned here. I guess the point was if queen d5 check,
check,
queen d7, queen a5 check, you could just play
check,
king e8. And now no more checks, and queen takes f7 is threatened. So it's kind of hopeless. So kind of a funny game. Kind of a funny game. But black actually missed a forced mate. And then white missed a forced mate. So they both missed forced mates. Both missed forced mates. Okay. So next thing I want to look at is bad indigestion against Martis. Okay, this game was actually super interesting. Super interesting. Okay. So it went e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, take, knight take, bishop e. Oh, sorry, knight f6. Okay. So this is the Paulson, or it's actually called the pin variation because you pin. Okay, so the correct way to play this variation, by the way, is to play e5, and then knight d5, bishop d2. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop e7, and queen g4. And it kind of resembles a French in a way. It's like kind of like a little bit like a winnower, sort of. Except black keeps the bishops. So white's slightly better here. But if white doesn't know what he's doing, black can easily get much better, and that's evident here because he played this move. Just loses the pawn. Knight takes e4, wins a pawn. Queen d4 now. Okay. So now the right way to take is to take, so there's two ways to take. You can take with the knight or you can take with the bishop. The right way to take is to take with the knight. So if you take on b4, I'm just going to play knight d5. Queen d6, I just play knight c6. I'll play queen e7 and I'll castle. If you take on c3 with the pawn, or sorry, take on c3 with the knight, I'll go bishop f8 and defend this. So it seems like queen d4 is an aggressive move because it attacks three things. But when you take on c3 with the knight, you give your opportunity to go bishop f8 and just keep a pawn. So that's the correct way to take. But he took on c3 with the bishop instead. Now knight c3, knight f6. And now queen d6 is a little annoying. Queen e7, bishop f4, knight c6, rook d1. White's actually slightly better here, believe it or not. Because this rook is very passive, knight b5, knight c7 is coming. So black's up a pawn, but this bishop is entombed. So white's actually better, which is why you don't take with the bishop. Okay, but he took with the bishop.
Check.
Knight takes, knight f6. So he should have played queen d6 here, not allowing d5. Bishop g5, and of course, what does black play? d5. Same thing with that a4 versus b4 in that last game, or 2 games ago. Same idea. Okay, so bishop b5, check.
Check.
Bishop d7. King to castle. Okay, now, black should probably just take on b5 and play a6, and then just complete his development. But he decided to play a6 first, and now white to move and win. This is a stunning series of moves. This would have won a brilliancy prize at most tournaments. So can you guys see the winning line? It's very pretty. It's very pretty. So it's a very classic Sicilian sacrifice, but all the variations work, believe it or not. And the move is knight takes d5. So this looks like absurd, because it looks like you're hanging this, 2 different ways. You're hanging each piece 2 different ways, right? You're hanging each piece 2 different ways. Okay, well obviously knight takes d5, I win your queen. So that's not correct. So what happens if I take this way? What happens if I take this way? What happens if I take this way? Well, bad things happen on all variations, pretty much. Okay, give me 3 minutes. Okay, guys. So have you figured out why this wins? Have you guys figured out why this wins? Okay, so let's look at each move one at a time. So we'll look at first bishop takes b5. That's kind of the simplest one. Well, bishop takes b5, knight takes f6, GG. Right?
Check.
Yeah, it's just mate. If king e7, I don't know. I mean, I can go knight g8, double check.
Check.
And then this is just mate.
Check
Okay, so that's the
mate.
easiest one to figure out. That's the easiest one to figure out. Okay, so the question is what happens if I go a takes b5. Okay, so I'm down a piece. Okay, but I can take a piece back. So take. You gotta take, I mean, what else can you do? If you play queen a5, I can just play and then take on here. My king always has d2 if you try to mate me. So you take. I take.
Check.
King e7. And now the tricky part is actually just go knight e4. Knight e4, believe it or not. Because I'm actually threatening queen to f6 check and knight to d6. So for example, if you go, I don't know, knight c6 or something, I actually go check.
Check.
And now if you go to f8, I'll go check first.
Check.
And then I'll go back.
Check.
And if you go to e8, well, I can do the same thing, but if you go to e8, I can actually go mate.
Check.
Mate you like this.
Checkmate.
So it's a quiet move, knight e4, which is tricky. With this idea of queen f6 and knight d6. So after queen e4, what you have to try in that position is, or sorry, after knight e4, you have to try like queen f8, and then queen f6.
Check.
King e8, knight d6, queen
Check.
d6. But okay, I mean, actually I can, okay, I can't take here yet because you can go here, but I can take here and I'm threatening this, and I just want to double up, so. So that wins. And so what happens if you take on d5 with the pawn? So ed5. So ed5, well, now we have this check.
Check.
You can't block. You can't block at all. You can't block with this because it's pinned. You can't block with this because it's pinned. And you can't block with the queen because I win it. So you gotta go king f8. You gotta go king f8, and now queen z5 check.
Check.
You can't block. You gotta go king g8. And now the point Now the point. Bishop takes f6. Okay, so if you go queen takes f6, I have a beautiful mate. Queen c8 check.
Check.
And rook e8 mate.
Checkmate.
That's one that you see in tactics books, right? That's one you see in tactics books. So you can't take with the queen. If you take with the pawn, I just go rook e3, threatening rook g3 mate. So you can't take on b5. So you're going to have to play h5. I take on d7. You take on d7, play rook g3 check, and move your king someplace. I take on d5, and I'm down a piece, but I'm threatening queen f5 check, and there's really no great answer to that. You got to play knight e5, queen e4 check.
Check.
Knight g6, and at the very least, I can just take on d8. And again, I'm up material. You're going to lose your queen. So you can actually not take if you want. You can play queen f8, but then bishop e7, queen e8, bishop d6, queen d8, bishop takes d7, knight takes d7, queen d7. Okay, so I'm now actually not even down material. I'm actually up a pawn. Knight f6. I'm up 2 pawns. So I'm up 2 pawns, and your king is stuck on g8, and your rook is stuck on h8. So this is pretty good. So you can't take on d5. So let's see what happens if you actually just ignore it. What happens if you just ignore it and just play knight c6? Just say, okay, I'm just going to try to get my pieces out. Well, I can just take on f6.
Check.
Take on f6. Check. Now I take on c6. Take on c6. If you take with the pawn, well, bishop takes f6 is going to be deadly. So if you take with the bishop, it's actually still the same thing, because I'll just go check. Check.
Check.
And check.
Check.
And I'm up an extra rook. So knight takes d5 would have been a stunning sacrifice that actually wins the game. White did not find it, unfortunately, though. And I took on d7, played rook e1, rook e3, and took on h6. This was a mistake. Should have probably just played bishop takes f6 or something. So he's trying to mate a little too hard here. But black has good enough defense. Queen h4, rook h2, knight g8, good move to defend h6 and also to offer a queen trade. Queen h5, queen f6, g4, queen g6, queen h4, f6, and yeah, there's really no attack here, and black's just up a piece. f4, knight e7, rook e3, knight c5, b4, knight e4, he takes, d takes, rook d7, rook f7, and now he took on e7, not really sure why. I mean, he could try f5, I guess. e5, gf5, queen g1,
check.
Rook e1, defended, and queen g7, but, oh sorry, queen g7, but he's just still up a piece. White has some pseudo activity, but not really anything worth much. But yeah, after rook f7, he just took on e7, and that's pretty much it, because he's just down a rook now. So kind of interesting game, even though it was fairly short. Okay, so we got 3 more games to go, guys. Stick with me. Try to finish it up in the next 10-15 minutes. So the next one is going to be between Up and Comer and 15 Hats. This is actually a really, really well played game. That kind of shows you the difference in class. Okay, so this is a Benko. Okay, so all this was normal. All of this was normal. So they actually played a lot of theory here. Okay. So in this position, the most normal move here is, again, knight to d2 with knight to c4. I think we've seen this before, actually. Knight to d2 with knight to c4 idea. But black, where white plays this move a4, which is actually a mistake, theoretically. Because it's important for white to be able to control the b4 square. Because now black can play queen to b4, and it's very hard for white to kick his queen away, and black's just threatening knight takes e4 here. So after knight to d2, knight to d7, this is just a good version of what kind of happened later in the game. Another idea that black can actually play here, rather than queen to b4, is bishop to g4. And then after knight d2, take on e2, take on e2, and knight d7. And actually getting rid of that bishop is not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, a4 is an inaccuracy. So knight b d7 was played, which is also okay. a5. Okay, so now the question is where to put the queen. So queen d4, the problem is now rook a4 comes. Now the queen has to go back someplace. But what the queen should go is it should go to b7. It looks a little strange to put it on b7 because it seems like this bishop is bad. Which is why bishop g4, like I showed you earlier, made sense. But the reason why the queen belongs on b7 is because the more natural queen c7 is actually taking the space of another piece. And that piece is the knight. The knight belongs on c7. So the idea is black wants to play knight e8, knight c7, and e6, and just focus on d5 and breaking up the pawn chain. Also, knight e8 gives this bishop massive scope, and the b7 queen still attacks the pawn on b2. So queen b7 is the correct move here. Queen c7 was played instead, and now notice that this queen is kind of taking the square of this knight from e8. So knight to d2, and here probably black should start with rook to b8 and rook to b4. Again, kind of another reason why a4, a5 is not really the best before choosing to do what he did. But he played e6 first. Problem with this move is that knight c4 is strong. E d5, knight d5, knight d5, queen d5 threatening the rook. Bishop e7, queen d6 wins a pawn because I'm attacking the queen, so you have no time to take this. And if you take my queen, I take, and I'm defending my pawn. And white's just up a pawn. White's just up a pawn. Okay. So e6 is a little premature. But he took on e6, took on e6, knight c4. Okay, so here again, we need to defend this square. So the right way to do it is to play knight e8. And then after castle, just rook to b8. And this is probably about equal. This rook is great on b8. This bishop's going to b7 to attack e4. This other rook is doing quite well. But white has his trumps too. He has a little bit more space. This pawn on d6 is classically weak. So it's probably about equal. Okay, but instead, after knight c4, he played knight takes e4, which is a mistake. Because actually, this just loses material. Knight takes e4, d5. Okay, so it looks like he's getting his piece back, but the problem is that these knights can move with tempo. These knights can move with tempo. And the way to do it the best is to simply play knight to g5. And now I'm threatening to take on e6, but I'm also simply threatening to move this knight away and remain up a piece. So knight to g5, rook e8. I mean, if you take on c4, I'll just take on, oops. If you take on c4, I'll take on e6, queen c6, take on f8, take on f8. And I can just castle here, actually. If bishop f3, I can check first and then move the rook. But I can just castle. Oops, just castle. I have two bishops, and I'm up the exchange, and your pawns are weak. This is just very good for white. So probably relatively best would be to play rook e8. But now I just move my knight, and I'm just up a piece. Up a piece for a pawn. And it's pretty simple. But unfortunately, white missed knight g5. He played knight e d6, which is a big mistake, because now black just gets his piece back. D takes c4. Okay, now white has to realize that this knight is much stronger than any piece that black has. So white should just kind of continue with castling here. But he took on c8, which seems really strange, because this knight seems much better than this bishop at the moment. And okay, if it comes to b7, okay, maybe then you'll take on b7, because then you have bishop f3 to follow. But there's no need to rush taking on c8. So this was, an exchange that shouldn't occur. So knight takes c8, rook a c8, bishop takes c4. Okay. So black in this position probably wants to keep the queens on, because a queen trade will make this pawn weaker. But white has some issues with his king, because it's kind of, this f file is open, and And currently black has a little bit more activity than white. So we should probably play queen c6 here. Attack g2. Castle, and then knight e5. Bishop e2, and play c4. And, you know, just try to get a rook to d8, try to get a knight to d3. Try to shield the fact that this pawn is really weak. But instead, black played queen
check.
e5 check, and now, unfortunately, this queen trade actually helps white more than it helps black. Because queen e2, you kind of have to take, or else you're just going to lose this pawn. So queen takes e2.
Check.
King takes e2. Rook c6, kind of forced to defend this pawn. And now maybe f4 to stop knight e5. Kind of a prophylactic move before undergoing what he did, because what he did was play rook to d1, which kind of forced black to play a good move. Knight e5 hitting the bishop, bishop b3, and now c4. And now this diagonal, if I could draw correctly, this diagonal is blocked. So f4 was a good move to kind of prevent knight e5. But now black is kind of holding everything together. Bishop c2, and this is just roughly equal. Knight g4 hitting f3, or sorry, f2, f3. Knight takes h2 is a little too greedy. It gets trapped probably. So knight f6. And here, white probably needs to repurpose his bishop with bishop a4 and bishop f4 and b4 and bishop d6. And now the bishops are actually doing something more than they were a couple of moves ago. But instead, he played bishop e3. Rook b8, strong move, attack to b2. So bishop b6 is probably what he should do. I mean, if you're going to play bishop e3, the point is to play bishop b6 and kind of block up this. And also, now this is not defended anymore, so the bishop can somehow get on this diagonal. He can win that pawn. But he played rook a b1. And now knight d5 is a very good move. A very good move. Because now c3 is always looming in the air. You're threatening to take on e3 maybe. Bishop d4. Yeah, now black's actually just much better. After bishop takes d4, rook takes d4, rook c5 hitting a5. King d2. Okay, but if I take a5 immediately, c4 would hang. So I want to defend that with rook b4. Rook e4, so now I'm attacking this. King f7 defended. b3, try to attack this. c3 defended.
Check.
King d3, okay. So now if you take on a5, I'll take on b4, then take on c3. So as black here, you should play rook to b8 simply. Just remove the rook from capture. And after b4, just play rook cb5. And now this pawn is a goner. And black's just going to be up a pawn. And it's good for black. But this exchange did not happen bishop f8. It happened instead, which is a mistake. Because now bishop a4 is very strong. This rook really has no place good to go. Can't go rook d6 because bishop e5. And can't go rook c7 because bishop e5. So you gotta go rook c8. So actually, believe it or not, the best move here for black is to play rook d6. With the idea of bishop e5, king f7. King f2, no rush. Rook c8, bishop d6, bishop d6. And, okay, I mean, you're down at full exchange, but it's not super easy. I mean, this knight is well posted on d5. This pawn on b2 is always a weakness. Bishop e5 and rook b8 is potentially coming. So black has some chances to hold this, actually, but rook c8, which, you know, looks the best at first glance, is actually not. Because bishop d7 and knight f4, only real hope, because, you know, if you play rook d8 or something, I'll just play bishop takes e6, which is actually mate. Don't forget that's actually mate.
Checkmate.
Just to prove it to you. So knight f4 check is forced. And now white has to find an accurate move here. And the problem is all of black's pieces are on the wrong squares. So if you notice, this knight and this rook can be forked. So all white has to do is make his king safe. And so the right move is king f1. And after rook d8, a couple of things you can do. Bishop b6, bishop b5. Bishop b6 probably better. King f7, bishop d8, rook d8, bishop c6, knight d5, bishop d5, e5, rook bc1 threatening this. Bishop e7, b3, cb3, and rook c7. And this is probably winning for white because I'm going to win this pawn on a6. If you play rook d6, I'll just play rook b7, rook b6. So it's a little bit different than the other exchange down line I showed you. So bishop d7, knight f4, but he played king e3, which is a mistake. Because now rook d8, and all of a sudden black is surviving. If you take on f4, I'll take on d7. So relatively best is bishop e5, but then I play rook b7, bishop f4, rook bd7, rook d7, rook d7. This is just equal. Probably just a draw. Probably just a draw. But white made a mistake here and played bishop to f6. And now black actually has a good move here. So again, notice that this king and this bishop are a knight fork away from each other. So the right way to do it is to play rook takes d7 first. Rook takes d7, knight d5 check.
Check.
And now 2 pieces for rook is kind of hopeless. Rook takes d5, e takes d5 is best. Rook d1, king f7, tempo. Bishop c3, bishop c5 check, tempo.
Check.
King f4, king e6, and this is actually really good for black because these pawns are on dark squares and this pawn is going to come real quick. So this is actually really good. But black missed this. And the other variation is if he takes on f4. So after rook takes e7, if king takes f4, well then I can just play rook f7 pin, king e5, rook b5 pin,
Check.
king e6, rook a5, g4 to try to play g5, rook b7 try to mate, try to staircase mate, g5, rook f5, rook bc1, and rook f3. And this is actually slightly better for black too. But he had to play rook takes d7 first. He had to play rook takes d7 first. He instead played knight d5
Check.
first, and unfortunately now rook takes d5 wins. Well, actually, it's better for white. Do you guys see what black must play here? Because don't forget, if take, mate.
Checkmate.
So black has to play bishop h6 check.
Check.
So to give the king to f8. So king d4, e d5, bishop e6,
Check.
king f8, bishop d8, rook d8, bishop d5, bishop d2, king c4, rook c8,
Check.
king d3, rook d8, king d2, rook d5,
Check.
king c3, rook a5. It's actually drawish, believe it or not. White's up a pawn, but 3 versus 2, it's kind of drawish. But unfortunately, black walked into a mate in 1. He had to play bishop h6 and try to go for that either opposite color bishop ending or that rook ending. But he played take and he got mated. So,
Checkmate.
Alright, so that was that game. So 2 games to go. We're in the home stretch, guys. We're in the home stretch. Okay, so we'll look at the quick game between Higgs and Pot Pie Dude. This wasn't actually too interesting of a game, but it was high level, so we'll take a look at it. Okay, set white name Higgs 137. Set black name Pot Pie. Okay. So it was an Alkine, kind of an odd variation though. Popeye played a offbeat variation, knight f3. So the normal moves are either bishop g4, g6, or d takes e5. He played bishop f5. It's a move, but not so common. Bishop d3 is most principled. Take, knight c6, castle, and e6. Okay. So here, if white wants to try to fight for advantage, he has to go something like c4, knight b6, e d6, bishop d6. Okay, c5 doesn't work, by the way, because I can just take it. The queen is pinned. But just knight c3. And this is how white tries to fight for advantage. And then he, puts a bishop on g5, puts a rook on e1, puts a rook on d1. And he has a little bit more space. But after bishop d2 is kind of just equal. Because after d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d takes e5, c6. Really, it's just, kind of even position. So here you have to realize that you want to try to get your rook on the d file. So the right way to go is to go queen e2, bishop c5, rook d1, castle, and c4. And okay, white's probably a slight pull here. When the knight moves, the bishop can deflect, discover an attack on the queen at some point. But instead, queen e2 was not played. He played knight c3, which is a mistake, because now knight b4 is strong. And probably relatively best would be queen e2, knight c2, rook d1, temporary pawn sacrifice. Actually a pawn sacrifice, but get some good compensation, because the point is you can't really ever develop this bishop comfortably. For example, if queen f3, bishop e7, I go queen g3. And now you can't castle because of bishop h6. So you have to play king f8 here. And then knight e4. So white's down a pawn, but he has some compensation because this pawn is strong on e5, and black's king's a little misplaced. So that's the idea of the pawn sacrifice. But Higgs just went for this queen takes d8 line, rook takes d8, bishop g5, bishop e7, take, and rook c1. Okay. So Popeye should probably play f6 here. a3, knight d5.
Check.
Take.
Check.
Take, rook fd1, rook hd8. Take, and king f1 and king e1. Okay, it's probably a draw, but at least black's king gets more active. So the point of f6 is to undermine e5 so we can get our king in. But f6 was not played. He played instead rook d2, which looks active, but actually doesn't do anything. a3. And now Papa actually plays knight takes c2, where now white can force a draw with knight e4 and knight c3. But actually white could have won a piece here, believe it or not, with knight to b1. So if white wasn't happy with the draw, he could play knight to b1. This is very double-edged, though. This is very double-edged. So the point is, after knight to b1, rook e2, I play rook fd1, and the knight's trapped. So I'm simply threatening to play knight c3. And actually the rook is trapped too, believe it or not. So black would have to play knight takes a3, knight takes a3, and rook takes e5. And if you count material, white has 4 pawns, black has 7, but white's up a piece. So who knows what's going on here? It's probably slightly better for white, but it's dangerous because now black actually has some winning chances too, because these pawns are, are pretty compact. There's no double pawns anywhere. It's hard to attack these pawns. So this is an interesting way that white could have played if he wanted to try to win, but he was kind of happy with the draw against Popeye, I guess, so he just repeated moves this way. And there's no way to avoid this. If rook d4, just knight d6, and the knight's still trapped. Rook d2, just knight c4. And now when you play rook d4, I can take and win the knight. So he just repeated moves, and it was a draw. Interesting game. But white could have played for a little bit more. Okay, now one last game, guys. One last game. And then we'll be done. This was actually kind of super interesting game between Andrew and Frums. Okay. Okay, so they actually play this super theoretical line in the Austrian attack of the Pierts. So I'm not going to comment on any of these moves because this is all theory. It's supposedly good for white, but I mean, if white doesn't know what he's doing completely, it could be good for black too. So e6, this is all theory.
Check.
King d7 is theory too. Queen a5,
check.
Knight c3, cd4, knight d4, h5, h3. Okay. So now this is the first move where black kind of played a non-theoretical move. So the best move here is knight to c6. Idea is if you take on c6, I'll take on c3.
Check.
Bishop d2. Okay, if you take on c3, I'll take on c3 and take on a1. So bishop d2. Bishop takes d2,
check.
Queen takes d2, queen takes d2,
check.
d2, bc6, hg4, hg4, rook h8, rook h8. It's all kind of forced. Rook h1, trick. So if you take, I queen. So you can't take. I got a rook f8. Rook h4, g3, rook g4, rook takes f7. This is pretty equal. Pretty equal. Just even pawns and rook ending. If you take here, I'll take here. And if you take here, it's just 4 on 4. So that's one way to play it. The other way to play it is after knight c6 to play knight de2. Kind of remove everything from take. Knight h6, bishop e3, knight f5, bishop f2, king e6. King e6 to try to play king takes f7. And who knows what's going on in this position. It's probably white's slightly better, but it's kind of crazy. But knight c6 just helps develop another piece, kind of the gain of time. because I'm attacking d4. So if you take g4, of course, I'll take on d4. Okay, but he played knight h6 right away, which is a bit of a mistake, because now bishop e3, knight c6, and he gets to castle. So he kind of gets a free move to get castled. So here, black should probably try knight f5, knight c6, bc6, bishop f2, bishop c3, bc3, king e6. And again, it's unclear. Black's winning his pawn back, but his king side is kind of unsafe. Bishop versus knight is favorable to white. Pressure down the e-file. And black's queen's a little misplaced. But who knows what's going on here? Who knows what's going on here? So instead he played queen b4, which is actually a big mistake. Because white actually could play knight d5 here. And the point of this is after queen c4, you play knight to b3. And you are threatening this move. So say you play, I don't know, rook f8 or something. I'm threatening this move. And now no matter how you take, I get a fork on b6. So that's the point of knight d5. Because this king and queen are actually very precarious. And after knight d5, the queen has to either go to c4 or to a4. Queen takes b2 is suicidal, rook b1 just wins. And on both a4 and c4, there's this fork possibility. So let me just show you a sample line just to show you what I mean. So king d8 to kind of avoid that. c3, knight f5, bishop f2. No, knight cd4 is best, believe it or not. Trying to take this. Knight takes d4, queen takes d5, knight takes f5, queen takes d1, rook a takes d1, g takes f5, rook d5. Winning this pawn, you can't play here because I can take this. King d7, c5, a6. And right now, currently, black has what, 5 pawns, white has 7. You're probably going to lose f7, but you're still going to be down a pawn, so this is good for white. Okay, that's just a sample line. But knight g5 was a good move. Okay, he instead played knight ce2, a little bit more passive. Queen c4, f5, knight f5, knight f5. Okay, this is just trying to get his pieces activated white. And black doesn't mind trading because it makes his king safer. Rook takes f5. Okay. So here you need to kind of stop this pawn in its tracks. Rook a f8. So you're threatening just a take because your queen's on it. Queen f1, bishop f6, block. Knight f4, and queen e4. And this is okay for black. White's probably better after knight d5, but not significantly. But instead, after black played queen e6, now queen d3 is strong. The problem is this queen is no longer eyeing the queen side, so queen to b5 is actually going to be really dangerous pretty soon. So bishop f6, and now, for example, knight f4, queen f7, knight d5, queen e6, rook f1, just piling up, rook f8, and now queen b5 is strong. Because how do you really defend against queen takes b7? You don't really want to play b6 because you make this knight leak. I mean, you have to, but simply c3, rook a c8, and rook 1 f4. And now you have ideas of rook a4 to rook takes a7. You have ideas of rook c4. Depending, queen takes f5 is probably out of the question because you have some sort of discovery. And black is just very, very passive here. He can't move his knight, can't move his rook, can't move his queen, can't move his bishop. Really, he's just kind of stuck. So, in any case, instead of knight f4, he played rook to b5 right away. So knight f4 was a good move to throw in just to make the queen a little bit less strong. And here, black had the opportunity to actually take on e3.
Check.
Take on e3 and bishop d4. And this is, better for white, but at least you get the queens off. So queen takes d4, knight takes d4. Wait, sorry, what am I doing? Yeah, right. So queen takes d4, knight takes d4. Wait, something's wrong. Queen 3, bishop f6, rook b5. Oh, sorry, b6 will happen first. Sorry. And then knight f4. So here, queen takes d3.
Check.
Sorry. And then bishop d4 here. Queen takes d4, knight takes d4. Okay, you can't take on h5 because I have knight e2 check.
Check.
Deflection. If you take my knight, I take your rook. If you move your king, I'll take my knight and win a piece. So knight d4, rook g5 is better. And then knight e6, take rook f1, rook f8. and rook g6.
Check.
And white's better because he's up a pawn and a rook ending. The king will have to go back someplace. But not significantly better. So black should have probably tried to go for that. Endgame, instead he played queen takes f7, and now it's kind of hopeless. Rook f1, rook g8, king h1, just getting out of checks. Knight e5 is another mistake. Queen f5
Check.
is super strong. e6, queen e4, now queen b7 is threatened. So you gotta go something like king c7. Bishop d4, queen d7, rook b3, just trying to go rook c3. And just a sample line, rook h6, rook a3 threatening rook a7, a5, rook c3, king
Check.
b8, and rook b3. And you can't stop losing b6. Okay, but instead he took on e5 with the rook, which is also good. So it's a sacrifice, but only temporary. Bishop e5, queen b5 check.
Check.
Now the king can't really go someplace that it wants to, like c7, because of knight d5 check, winning the queen. So he has to go to c8. If he goes to d8, well, queen c6 is very strong. Queen f5, check.
Check.
Queen takes a7, queen c4, rook f2 just to stop queen takes f1, king c8, bishop takes b6, and queen c6. And white's actually better here, because eventually you'll try to swing the rook over to the third rank. Probably need to move this knight around someplace first, but okay. But that would have been a better try for black at least, because he played king c8. Played king c8, and now the problem is knight d5 just wins, because the queen's defending the rook. The rook's attacking the queen. I'm threatening queen c6 and queen c7. So queen g7 is kind of forced. Queen c6 check. You can't go this way. It's just mate.
Check.
That's just mate.
Checkmate.
So you got to go the other way. And now the most elegant way to win is knight to b4, because you're stopping mate. Because don't forget, black was threatening mate himself, but you're also threatening your own mate with knight a6. And there's actually no way to stop knight a6 other than to play queen takes g2.
Check.
So black will just be down the exchange after all this. Because don't forget, or sorry, down a piece. Because white sacrificed the exchange and then lost a rook, or black lost a rook. So take is all forced. And I just want to show you one last thing. Bishop e2, rook f7. So now it's just kind of technique.
Check.
King f2, bishop f6, knight d5. Okay, so knight d5 was a mistake, because if he wants to take on e7, he should just play knight c6 right away.
Check.
Knight c6, king a8, knight takes e7, bishop takes e7, rook takes e7, and just up a piece. You don't want to go king b7, because now
check.
I can take with check, and you don't have rook c8 available. So if you play king a8, when I take, you get to play rook c8, and you get to win this pawn. But it's still a win, because you're going to lose this pawn, and this pawn's got a queen. But this would have been the better way to play, because he played knight d5 instead. And the problem with knight d5 is after rook c8, it's actually tricky. c3 to defend the pawn, bishop h4 check. King f3, e6 to chase the knight, knight f6, and rook takes c3. And okay, I have 3 pawns for the piece, and I might win a 4th. White's still winning, but it's significantly harder than if he played knight c6 check to begin with. But he played knight d5, and instead of rook c8, he played rook g6, which is kind of lame. Knight f6, ef6, king f3, and I mean, it's just technique now. So white won. Okay, guys. Well, that's the week 2 recap. Hope you guys enjoyed it.